Before I begin, I'd like to address that I did not do previews for either of the two big shows this week, let alone G1 or anything. I'm not sure if I'll be doing All Out, but I generally don't really want to do AEW previews until they have their own TV show and I'm more familiar with their booking, because then it'll just be saying what the logical thing is to do. Whereas with WWE, it's more fun because they're stupid and they book things poorly a lot, not to mention the fact that they're an established entity, and whether their booking is good or bad, it's far easier to predict what they're going to do because there's a pattern. And if they go against that pattern, it's like, whoa. Or if I predict something against that pattern, I'm going off the rails. Whereas if I predicted the Young Bucks to beat Cody and Dustin, okay, probably. I don't know. And so there's less reasoning going on, and it just doesn't seem as fun to do. But I do plan on doing Survivor Series. I just lost track of time and couldn't fit in doing Extreme Rules before it came out. So, on to the review. The opening tag match was fine. It was one of those purposeful messes of a match that had a couple cool moments, but in my opinion, it was mostly just kind of bland, and it wasn't entertaining, and I didn't really like it that much. The Revival versus the Usos was a very good tag team match. I think if they'd gone 5 minutes longer, it could have been like a 4-star or higher match. But that being said, despite this being two of the best tag teams in the world, I do think even with the 12 and a half minutes they got, it could have been a lot better. It seems like the Usos were kind of off their game. A lot of their strikes were looking kind of weird, and their timing with each other seemed kind of off. That may have just been me, but it seemed noticeable to me. The Revival were totally on their game though. They looked like the Revival from NXT, not just in the in-ring stuff, but in the character work and the heel work. They're very entertaining, and honestly, if they hadn't been at the beginning of the show, by the time the show was over, I probably would have just watched like 3 or 4 Revival matches afterwards because I enjoyed them so much. So I'd probably give that honestly 3.5 stars, maybe 3.25. I really enjoyed it though. Aleister Black versus Cesaro was less than 10 minutes, which honestly, even considering how little I expected from WWE, as far as this match goes, I expected 15 minutes, so it's very disappointing there was only 10, but it was a very good 10 minutes. I think some people are overblowing it just because of who was in it, but it was really good. There are a lot of great strikes, a lot of great reversals. That one where Cesaro throws Aleister Black up from a powerbomb position and uppercuts him as he comes down was a little awkward, but still looked really cool, and it was a really good match for what it was, but it's another one where I think it could have been a lot better with more time. Bayley, in probably the most predictable match on the card, beat Alexa and Nikki, and in probably the most predictable specific finish in the card, Nikki cost them the match. No one cares about this storyline. Have Alexa betray Nikki and have them feud and get it over with. I actually like all 3 women involved in this, but the story's going nowhere. It's not interesting. We all know what's going to happen, but it's dragging on, and the match was okay. All 3 of them are capable of better matches. Bayley and Alexa together have put on better matches before. It wasn't the worst thing, but it was very okay. Strowman versus Lashley gave me similar feelings as the opening match, but it was more consistently entertaining. despite the fact that like any match that goes into like the backstage area There are a lot of lulls where they're just pushing each other around and dragging each other into those areas. But there are a few big moments that were very fun, and overall I enjoyed it. I gave a rating for the revival match. I didn't give a rating for the next match. I probably won't give a rating for this one. I just realized that was a thing I did, and I don't plan on doing that. But for the future, if I think about it more before recording, I might give star ratings. The New Day versus Bryan and Rowan versus Heavy Machinery was fine. It was there's a lot of chaos in this one, despite the fact there aren't many extreme anythings going on for the most part. There's a lot of chaos in these matches, and a lot of tag teams in these matches. There's a lot more tag team wrestling than there is extreme anything, even non-wrestling segments combined. It was pretty fun at parts. It was slow at parts, again. I honestly haven't been that big on Heavy Machinery. I like them, and I've enjoyed a match or two of theirs, but I feel like people keep throwing around 3.5 and 4-star ratings, where I think they're 2.5 or 3, where they're fine, there's a fun moment or two, whereas a lot of people are really enjoying their matches. So I'm not disliking them, but I'm less big on them than a lot of people seem to be. At the same time, though, it was solid. The last couple matches were really good. The New Day winning, it's fine, I guess. Heavy Machinery could have used the rub of being champions, especially in a match that involved the New Day. Bryan and Rowan didn't really need the titles, but they were doing a fine job with them. But I do look forward to seeing Bryan be a singles competitor again. It's not like he's been doing that for the last 5 years or so. He was retired most of that time, so it's not like this was a big needed change for him to be tag team wrestling. He just was, because that had nothing to do with him. AJ Styles and Ricochet was pretty good. It was fun, pretty much all throughout. There's a lot of good heel work from AJ. There's a lot of good limb work in general. There were a few really big, great spots from both of them. Obviously, Ricochet being the most athletic person on the planet was fun. There was a bit of inconsistency with AJ pulling the club off of Ricochet in the beginning of the match, and then near the end of the match, totally going along with the help they give him to win. But that didn't bother me a lot. It bothered me a little. It just didn't bother me enough that if I were to give it a rating, it would really affect it. I'm iffy about the result of the match, because of course I love AJ Styles, and if Ricochet was going to lose his new title pretty quickly, at least he lost it to possibly the best wrestler on the planet, probably the best wrestler in the company, and one of the biggest names in the company, in a really good match in which said wrestler had to use a top rope version of one of the most well-protected finishers in the history of wrestling to beat him. Also, I feel like Ricochet lost too quickly. I feel like the club could have cost AJ this match somehow, and then AJ ended up winning it at SummerSlam or something. But it's still a very good match. I don't have a problem with the ending, but I'm not sure if I feel like it was the right decision. Owens and Ziggler. I was honestly looking forward to a pretty good match, but I'm not disappointed either, because Owens might be my favorite guy on the roster, and he's a great wrestler and a great character, and he deserves a lot more than he's gotten. And I feel like him squashing a very accomplished wrestler who, despite the fact that he rarely wins the big ones, still wins a lot and still has had many Intercontinental title reigns and has put on a lot of great matches and is always competitive, even in the WWE title matches he loses. So he's still a pretty strong guy for him to literally beat with one move in under 20 seconds. Kofi and Samoa Joe. I'm just looking at the results now, and I didn't realize this was under 10 minutes. I thought it was 15 minutes, which I'm not saying as a bad thing. I enjoyed the match quite a bit. It's another one where it could have gone longer, but they had to make those two bookend matches that no one cared about the longest matches on the card because I don't know. But Joe was great as always. Kofi always looks really good when he's playing an underdog, and I really want Joe to win this match. I knew he wouldn't, and even then I'm disappointed in how he lost on top of it, because it was just an erroneous kick to the head. I know that's a finisher, but it's not a great looking finisher, and Joe was dominant most of the match. So I feel like if he's throwing around a guy and the guy hits their finisher, no matter how good the finisher is, if they're having so much trouble before, that finisher shouldn't just knock the bigger guy out of nowhere. And also, I'm sick of Joe losing these big matches. He keeps getting these title matches against great wrestlers, putting on great matches, and always losing in the end. Which, okay, to an extent that makes the guys he beat, to an extent that makes the guys he loses to look good, because they're winning a really good match against a really strong opponent. But the more times he loses, the more you diminish that. And he's one of the best wrestlers on the planet. He's like 40. I don't know how much longer he's going to be wrestling at this high of a level. And he deserves a title reign. He deserves a title reign. He deserves to be booked almost like Brock, in my opinion. He at least deserves to be booked like AJ was when he had the title for a year. Maybe not throwing people around like Brock does, but being a dominant champion, a wall that you can't get past. Because he's a monster. He's like 300 pounds. He can throw around guys like Kofi Kingston and AJ Styles. He's a submission specialist. He's one of the better strikers in the world. He's a great grappler. Extremely athletic for his size. He's just got it all. On top of being a great promo guy, which admittedly he didn't used to be, but he is now. Ride that shit. Becky and Seth versus Baron and Lacey was just a bunch of nonsense for 20 minutes. And again, is just really average WWE Extreme Rules circa 2019 stuff. A bunch of big spots that are way too predictable and mundane to actually get the reaction they expect. A bunch of goofy shenanigans, a bunch of yelling and name calling from mostly bad actors, and a finish that entertained me, but because it was so dumb. A finish that entertained me, but did so because it was so dumb, not because it was actually any good. And then Brock came out, and I'd already had this spoiled, but even then, for a second, I thought after Brock laid Rollins out with the F5, I thought for a second, because it's the most obvious thing in the fucking world, that Becky was going to come out recovering from the Deep Six Corin gave her. Becky was going to come out having recovered from the Deep Six that Corbin gave her, and push Brock off of him, or whack him with a chair and get Seth disqualified so he retains. And it was going to be this big glorious moment of Becky and Seth completely vanquishing Brock's dominance over that title, and basically the main event scene of the WWE for the last 2 years for good. But that didn't happen because, I don't know, they don't want people to watch their shows, I guess. So most of the matches were pretty good. A couple of them were very good. All of them could have been better given more time, except for the ones that weren't good to begin with. And yeah. Oh my god.